Hello from the underground. We're continuing with Balzac's �𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐼. Now before we get into it, disclaimer, well, not a disclaimer, a foreword addressed to the concepts that we're going to be exploring in this next section. That is what I believe we may be presenting as the true face of racism, what it means to be racist. I will be reading this portion. I'll be reading the entire book verbatim to the translation, but I don't think there's ever going to be so much of an issue with that approach as in this case. The true face of racism. I would like to elucidate a little bit on that, and I may be wrong, granted, but if we respect ourselves at all, we're going to be able to entertain each other's notions if they are worth entertaining at all. I feel that this is worth entertaining. Now, the true face of racism, as lighted upon in this next passage, is different from how we appreciate it today in a fairly double-speak and neuterized manner, as opposed racism being a general acknowledgement to differences between genealogical makeups. True racism, as it is portrayed through the character Vautrin, aka Mephistopheles in this story, is not the recognition of genealogical differences between races, but the exploitation of genealogical differences between nations. Why is that bad? Why does racism have to be bad? Well, because anybody who exploits anything is by nature bad. So we have, I think, every recipe, every ingredient necessary for the recipe at hand to be able to appreciate why racism is bad. The fact that races are different, I don't see why that's not good. But to play races against each other and to profit from your artificial conflicts, that's bad. I'm going to go out on the tallest limb and say, that's bad. That's what's bad. Right? Right. So says I. So says I, curator of Hurrah for the Underground. All right. Without further ado, continuing on Victor Vautrin's monologue, halfway through Balzac's 𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐼, and we'll recap a little bit just to regain our context and everything. I mean, it's a good monologue. I mean, God, an author has to be able to get inside the characters' heads and play them out naturally. That's the definition of good authorship, right? So just because an author has a racist character in the story doesn't make the author racist. I am actually quite livid and passionate on that point. And perhaps that is because I've been dogged by several so woke individuals. God love them, and indeed, dear friends of mine. Because there's more to life than just semantics, even if they do mean the world. I don't know what I'm saying. Come on. All right. Page 130th of Balzac's 𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐼. Well, then, if you want to make a fortune quickly, you must already be rich, or appear to be so. It's a manner here of playing for high stakes. If you don't, you're trifling. You cut no ice, and goodbye to you. If in the scores of professions you might follow, 10 men rise to the top quickly the public calls them thieves. Draw your own conclusions. That is life in its true colors. It's not much more attractive than the kitchen. It's just as smelly, and you have to dirty your hands if you want to live well. The only thing that matters is to know how to get them clean again. In that art lies the whole morality of our times. If I talk to you like this about the world, it's because it has given me reason to do so. I know it well. Do you think I blame it? Not at all. It has always been like this. Moralists will never change it. Man is no angel. He is sometimes more of a hypocrite and sometimes less, and then fools say that he has or has not principles. I don't think the rich are any worse than the masses. Men are much the same at the top, the bottom, and in the middle of the social scale. In a million of this herd of human cattle, there are 10 sharp fellows to be found who climb above everything, even above laws. I am one of them. You, if you are above the common herd, go straight forward with your head high. But you will have to fight against envy, slander, mediocrity, against the whole world. Napoleon came up against a minister of war called Aubry, who just failed to send him to the colonies. Sound yourself. See if you will be able to get up every morning with a will more determined than it was the night before. In that case, I'm going to make you an offer that nobody would refuse. Mind what I say. You see, I have a fancy. My notion is to go and live the patriarchal life on a great estate. Say, 100,000 acres in the United States of America, in the deep South. I intend to be a planter, to have slaves, earn a few nice little millions selling my cattle, my tobacco, my timber, living like a monarch, doing as I like, leading a life unimaginable by people here, where we live encroached in a little burrow made of stone and plaster. I am a great poet. My poems are not written. They are expressed in action and in feeling. I possess, at this moment, 50,000 francs, which would give me scarcely 40 niggers. I need 200,000 francs, for I want 200 niggers to carry out my idea of the patriarchal life properly. Negroes, you see, are children ready-made that you can do with what you like, without the nosy public prosecutor coming to ask you questions about them. With this black capital, in 10 years I shall have 3 or 4 millions. If I succeed, no one will say to me, "Who are you?" I shall be Mr. 4 millions, American citizen. I shall be 50 years of age, not yet rotten. I shall enjoy myself in my own fashion. In one word, if I find you an heiress worth 1 million, will you give me 200,000 francs? 20% commission. Well, is that too much? You will make your little wife love you. Once married, you will make a show of uneasiness and remorse. You will go about with a long face for a couple of weeks. Then, one night after some tomfoolery, you will confess to your wife between 2 kisses that you have debts amounting to 200,000 francs and call her darling. This farce is played every day by young fellows of the highest rank. A young woman does not refuse her purse to the man who captures her heart. Do you think that you will be a loser by it? Not you. You will find a way to make up your 200,000 francs again by a stroke of business. With your capital and your sharp wits, you will pile up a fortune as large as your heart could wish. Ergo, in 6 months you have made us all happy. Yourself, a sweet wife, your old Papa Vautrin, not to speak of your family, blowing on their fingers in the winter-time for want of firewood. Don't let my offer, or what I ask for either, startle you. Out of 60 fashionable marriages taking place in Paris, 47 are made on similar terms. The Chamber of Notaries forced Monsieur— "What must I do?" said Rastignac, eagerly interrupting him. "Practically nothing," Vautrin replied, with an involuntary movement of delight like a suppressed exclamation of an angler feeling a bite at the end of his line. "Mark this well. The heart of a poor, unfortunate, and unhappy girl is the thirstiest of sponges to soak up love. a parched sponge, which expands as soon as a drop of tenderness falls on it. To court a young woman you meet in circumstances of loneliness, despair, and poverty, when she has no suspicion of the wealth in store for her, by heaven, it's like having a sequence of 5 and a quatorze piquet. It's knowing the number in the lottery beforehand. It's playing the stock market with secret information. On a solid foundation, you are building an indestructible marriage. When the girl comes into millions, she will throw them at your feet like pebbles. "Take them, my darling Adolphe," she will say, or "Take them, my dearest Alfred, or Eugene, or anyone who has had the wit to sacrifice herself for her." By sacrifice, I mean selling your old coat in order to eat mushrooms on toast with her at the Cordon Bleu, and go on afterwards to the 𝐵𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵 in the evening, or pawn your watch to give her a shawl. I needn't say anything to you about scribbling love letters to her, or the sentimental monkey tricks that go down so well with women, such as sprinkling drops of water on your writing paper like tears when you are separated from her. You seem to me to be perfectly well acquainted with the lingo of the heart. Paris, you see, is like a forest in the New World where a score of savage tribes, the Illinois, the Hurons, struggle for existence. Each group lives on what it can get by hunting throughout society. You are a hunter of millions. To capture them, you employ snares, limed twigs, decoys. There are many ways of hunting. Some hunt heiresses. Some catch their prey by shady financial transactions. Some fish for souls. Others sells their clients bound hand and foot. The man who comes back with his game bag well lined is welcomed, feted, received into good society. Let us be just to this hospitable place. Here you have to do with the most accommodating city in the world. If the proud aristocracies of the capitals of Europe refuse to give a blackguard millionaire admittance to their ranks, Paris holds out her arms to him, runs to his parties, eats his dinners, and clanks glasses with his infamy. "But where should I find such a girl?" said Eugene. "She is there, before your eyes, and yours already." "Mademoiselle Victorine?" "Precisely." "Say that again." "She loves you already, your little Baroness de Renesta." "She hasn't got a sou," said Eugene in astonishment. "Ah, now we're coming to it. Another word or two, and everything will be clear. Father Taillefer is an old scoundrel who is credited with having murdered one of his friends during the Revolution. He is one of my brave boys, who are independent in their views. He is a banker, the senior party of the firm of Frederick Taillefer and Company. He has only one son, and means to leave all he possesses to him, to the prejudice of Victorine. Such injustices do not please me. I'm like Don Quixote, and I like to defend the weak against the strong. If it were the will of heaven to take his son from him, Taillefer would acknowledge his daughter. He would want to have someone or other to leave his money to. It's a weakness of human nature, and he's not likely to have any more children. I know. Victorine is gentle and sweet. She will soon twist her father round her little finger and make him spin like a humming top with the whip of sentiment. She will appreciate your devotion too much to forget you, and you will marry her. For my part, I will take the role of Providence upon myself. I'll persuade the will of heaven to act in the right way. I have a friend I've done some very good turns to, a colonel in the army of the Lyre, who has just been transferred into the Garde Royale. He's a man who listens to my advice, and he turned ultra-royalist. He isn't one of those idiots who stick to their opinions. If I have one more piece of advice to give to you, my sweet lad, it is this. Don't stick any more firmly to your opinions than to your work. When you are asked for them, sell them. A man who boasts of never changing his opinion is a man who forced himself to move always in a straight line, a simpleton who believes he is infallible. There are no such things as principles. There are only events. There are no laws. There are only circumstances. The man who is wiser than his fellow accepts events and circumstances in order to turn them to his own ends. If there were fixed principles and laws, nations would not change them as easily as we change our shirts. The individual is not expected to be more scrupulous than the nation. The man who has rendered least service to France is an uncompromising Lafayette. Yet he is a fetish, venerated because he has always seen everything in black and whites. At best, he's good enough to be put in the conservatoire among the machines, labeled like the rest of the exhibits, while Talleyrand, that torturous Talleyrand, the prince at whom everyone has a stone to fling, who has sufficient contempt for humanity to spit as many vows as it asks for in its face, was the man who saved France from being torn to pieces at the Congress of Vienna. They flag-mudded him, and they owe him laurel wreaths. Oh, I know what's going on in the world. I hold the key to many man's secrets. That's enough. I shall hold an unalterable opinion when I find 3 minds together on the application of a principle, and I shall wait a long time. There are not 3 judges in the law courts with the same opinion about a point of law. Well, to return to my man, he would put Christ back on the cross if I asked him to. At a single word from his papa Vatrine, he will pick a quarrel with that scamp who doesn't send so much as a 5-franc piece to his sister, and Vatrine rose to his feet, took up a defensive posture like a fencing master, and then lunged. And underground, he added. Horrible, said Eugene. You're joking, Monsieur Vatrine, aren't you? You must be. No, keep cool, said the man. Don't behave like a child. Still, if it amuses you, you can stamp your foot and fly into a rage. You can call me a scoundrel, a scallywag, a rapscallion, a ruffian. Only don't call me a blackleg or a spy. Go ahead, fire your broadside. I forgive you. It's so natural at your age. I was like that myself once. Only consider. You will do worse someday. You will go and flirt with some pretty woman, and you will take her money. The thought has entered your mind, of course, said Vatrine. For how are you going to get on if your love-making doesn't bring you money? Virtue, my dear student, is indivisible. It either is or it is not. They tell us to do penance for our sins. That's a fine system, which rids you of a crime by an act of contrition. You seduce a woman in order to set your foot on some rung of the social ladder. You stir up dissension amongst the children of a family. You stoop to all the shameful practices that are employed, under the rose or openly, for the sake of pleasure or personal advantage. Do you believe those are works of faith, hope, and charity? Why should the toff who robs a boy of half his fortune in a night get off with 2 months in prison, while the poor devil who steals 100-franc note with aggravating circumstances is sent to penal servitude? Those are the laws. There isn't a clause in them which does not touch absurdity. The honey-tongued man in a yellow glove has committed many a murder. He sheds no blood, but his victim sweats blood for him just the same. The other rascal opened a door with a jemmy. Dark deeds, both of them. Between what I propose and what you will one day do, there's no difference bar the bloodshed. And you believe in absolute standards in that world? Despise men, then, and look for your holes you can slip through in the law's net. The secret of great fortunes, with no apparent source, is a forgotten crime. Forgotten because it was properly carried out. Oh, don't say any more. I don't want to listen to you. You make me doubt myself. At this moment, I only know what I feel. As you please, my fine fellow. I thought you were tougher, said Vatrine. I won't say any more. Just one thing, though. He stared hard at the student. You know my secret, he said. A young man who refuses you will know he must forget it. That's well said. I'm pleased with you. Anyone else, you know, will be less scrupulous. Bear in mind what I want to do for you. I'll give you a fortnight to decide about my offer. You can take it or leave it." "What a will of iron that man has," said Rastignac to himself as he watched Vautrin walk unconcernedly away, his stick under his arm. "Yet he only told me bluntly what Madame de Besson dressed up in a polished phrase. He tore my heart with claws of steel. Why do I intend to visit Madame de Nucingen? He guessed my motives before I knew them myself. In fact, that outlaw told me more about virtue than I ever learned before from men of books. If virtue admits of no compromise, have I robbed my sisters then?" he said, throwing the bag on the table. He sat down again, his brain in a whirl, and went on pondering. "Must I be faithful to virtue? A heroic martyr? Everyone believes in virtue, but who practices it? Every nation worships liberty. But where on the face of the earth can you find a free nation? My youth is still like a blue, unclouded sky. Does wishing to be great or rich mean that I must make up my mind to lie, give away, cringe and spring up again, flatter and disassemble? Does it mean making myself the lackey of other men who have lied, yielded, and cringed? I must be their servant before I can be their accomplice. Well, then, no. I mean to work honorably and upright. I will work day and night, and owe my fortune to nothing but my own exertions. It will be the slowest of roads to fortune, but every night I shall lay my head on my pillow, untroubled by evil thoughts. What can be finer than to look back on your life and find it as free from stain as a lily? Life and I are like a young man and his sweetheart. Vautrin has let me see what happens after 10 years of married life. Hell! Oh, my head is swimming. I don't want to think about anything at all. The heart is a sure guide." Fat Sylvie's voice roused Eugene from his musings. She announced that his tailor had come, and Eugene went to interview the tailor with his money-bags in hand, and was not at all displeased to be appearing thus. Having tried on his dress clothes, he put his new morning costume on and was transformed completely by it. "I'm every bit as good as a Monsieur de Tralles now," he said to himself. "That is to say, I look like a gentleman." Old Goriot came to the student's door. "You asked me, sir, if I knew the house Madame de Nucingen visits," he said. "Yes." "Well, she is going to the Marechal Carigliano's ball on Monday. If you can manage to be there, you will let me know how my 2 girls enjoyed themselves, and what they wore, and all about it, won't you?" "How did you find that out, my good Goriot?" asked Eugene, giving his visitor a chair by the fire. "Her maid told me. I hear about everything they do from Teresa and Constance," he added gleefully. The old man was like a lover who is still young enough to be delighted by a stratagem which gives him a point of contact with his mistress without her knowledge. "You will see them both," he went on, naively betraying his pang of jealousy. "I don't know," Eugene replied. I'll call on Madame de Besson and ask if she can present me to the marshal's wife." Eugene felt a thrill of secret joy as he thought of appearing before the Viscountesses dressed as he would be from that day forward. What moralists call the abysses of the human heart are only the treacherous thoughts, the involuntary impulses of self-interest. Those strayings from the course marked out, which are so often inveighed against, those sudden changes of direction, are moves prompted by the hopes of pleasure. Rastignac, seeing himself well dressed, with the correct gloves and boots, forgot his virtuous resolutions. Youth, moreover, when it turns to wrongdoing, dares not look at itself in the mirror of conscience, while maturity has seen itself there. The whole difference between these two phases of life lies in that. The whole difference between these two phases of life lies in that. In the last 2 days, Eugene and his neighbor, old �𝐥𝐝, had become good friends. This growing secret friendliness had the same psychological causes as the antipathy which the student was beginning to feel to Vautrin. The bold philosopher who sets out to establish the effects produced in the physical world by our emotions will undoubtedly find more than one proof of their influences on matter in the means of communication they set up between us and the lower animals. What physiognomist is quicker to apprehend a character than a dog is at knowing whether a stranger likes him or not? Atoms, affinities, familiar words in common use, are facts whose names have survived in modern language to the confusion of those fatuous philosophers who like to winnow the shaft from the fundamental words of the language. We feel that we are loved. Feelings affect everything and can cross space. A letter is a living soul. It is so faithful an echo of the voice that speaks it that sensitive spirits count it among love's richest treasures. Old 𝐿𝐥𝐝's devotion, a matter of feeling, not of mind, had given him the sublime sensitivity of the canine world, and he had intuitively perceived the compassion for him, a kindly admiration, the youthful sympathy which had stirred in the student's heart. This dawning friendship, however, had not yet led to any confidences. If Eugene had made his desire to see Madame de Nucingen clear, it was not because he was relying on the old man to introduce him to her house, but he hoped that an indiscretion might serve him well. Old 𝐿𝐥𝐝 had only spoken of his daughters to him in reference to what Eugene had said so frankly in public about them on the day of his 2 afternoon calls. "My dear sir," he had said to him the next day, "how could you have thought that Madame de Restaud was cross with you for mentioning my name? My 2 girls are very fond of me. I am a happy father. But my sons-in-laws behave badly. I did not want my darlings to suffer because of my differences with their husbands, so I prefer to see them in secret. My clandestine glimpses of them gives me far more pleasure than other fathers enjoy who can see their daughters whenever they like. I can't do that, you understand, and so when it is fine, I go to the Champs-Élysées after finding out from the maids if my daughters are going out. I wait for them to pass. My heart beats fast when their carriages come. I admire them in their fine dresses. They throw me a little smile as they pass, and then the sun seems to come out and gild all nature for me. I wait, for they will come back the same way, and I will see them again. The air has done them good. Their cheeks are rosy. I hear someone near me say, 'That's a beautiful woman.' That makes my heart rejoice. Are they not my flesh and blood? I love the horses that draw them, and envy the little dog on their lap. I live in their pleasure. Every man loves in his own fashion. Mine does no harm to anyone, so why should people trouble themselves about me? I am happy in my own way. Is there any law against my going to see my daughters, in the evening when they are leaving to go to a ball? What a disappointment it is if I get there too late and they say, 'Madame has gone out.' Once I waited till 3 in the morning to see Nasi, when I had not seen her for 2 days. I nearly died of joy. Please don't speak of me unless you want to say how good my girls are. They would like to spoil me with all sorts of presents, but I don't let them. 'Keep your money,' I tell them. What should I do with it? I don't want anything. For what, my dear sir, am I after all? A wretched old carcass whose soul is wherever my daughters are. When you had seen Madame de Nucingen, you must tell me which girl you prefer," the old fellow added after a moment, as he watched Eugene preparing to go out. He meant to pass the time walking in the Tuileries garden until he could venture to present himself in Madame de Basson's drawing-room. That walk was fatal to the student's good intentions. Several women noticed him. He was so handsome, so young, dressed with such elegance and in good taste. When he saw himself the center of an almost admiring attention, he thought no more about his plundered sister and aunt. None of his virtuous qualms. He had seen, passing over his head, that fiend whom it is so easy to take for an angel, the devil with the iridescent wings who scatters rubies and shoots his golden arrows against palaces, who clothes women in splendor and gilds thrones, so simple in their original function, with a senseless magnificence. He had listened to the flashy allurements of that vanity, whose crackling tinsel seems to us a symbol of power. Cynical as Vatrine's words were, they had an effect Cynical as Vatrine's words were, they had effected a lodgment in the student's heart, as the sordid profile of an old crone hawking rags dwells in the memory of the girl for whom she had predicted oceans of love and money. Eugene idly strolled along until about 5 o'clock, and then called at Madame de Basson's. There he received one of the terrible blows against which young hearts are defenseless. Up to that moment, the Viscountess had always shown him the polished courtesy, the bland graciousness of manner, which are the gifts of an aristocratic training, but are perfect only when they come from the heart. Now, when he came in, Madame de Basson's made a sharp gesture and said curtly, "Monsieur de Rastignac, I can't possibly see you, at least not now. I'm busy." To an observer, and Rastignac had rapidly become one, these words and the gesture, her glance, the inflection of her voice, told the whole story of the character and usages of her caste. He perceived the iron hand under the velvet glove, the selfishness, the egotism under the good breeding, the wood beneath the varnish. He understood at last the edict, "We the King," which issues from under the plumes above the royal thrones and is still heard under the crests of the simplest noblemen. Eugene had relied on a woman's nobility of mind too readily, on the strength of her word. Like all the unfortunate, he had signed in good faith the liberal pact which should bind the benefactor to the beneficiary, and whose first article demands complete equality between two generous hearts. The charity which binds two souls together and makes them one is a divine passion, as little understood and as rare as true love is. Both are the generous gift of noble natures. But Rastignac was set on going to the Duchess de Carigliano's ball, so he swallowed this rebuff. "Madame," he said in a faltering voice, "I should not have come to trouble you if it were not a matter of importance. Be so kind as to allow me to see you later. I can wait." "Very well, then, come and dine with me," she said, a little embarrassed by the harshness with which she had spoken, for this woman was truly as kind in nature as she was noble in rank. Although Eugene was touched by the sudden change of tone, he said to himself as he went away, "You must crawl. Put up with anything. What can the others be like if one of the kindest of women cancels all her promises of friendship in a moment and casts you off like an old shoe? It is every man for himself then. It is true that her house is not a shop, and I put myself in the wrong by needing her. As Vatrine said, you should smash your way like a cannonball." But the bitterness of this reflection soon disappeared in the pleasures of looking forward to dinner with the Viscountess. Thus, by a sort of fatality, the slightest accidents of the student's life conspired to push him into an arena where, According to the observations of the terrifying Sphinx of the Maison Vacher, he must kill to avoid being killed. If on the battlefield, as if on the battlefield, betray to avoid being betrayed, where he must leave his conscience and his heart at the gate, put on a mask, use men ruthlessly like pawns, and, as in ancient Sparta, seize the prize without being seen, to deserve the crown. On his return, he found the Viscountess as gracious and kind as she had always been to him. They entered a dining room where the Viscountess was waiting for his wife, where the Viscount was waiting for his wife near a table furnished with a sumptuousness which, as is well known, was carried to extremes in the time of the Restoration. Like many wearying men in the world, Monsieur de Basson had few pleasures left other than those afforded by good food. In fact, he was a gourmand of the school of Louis XVIII and the Duc d'Escars. His table, then, offered a double luxury. Delicious food was served in splendid vessels. This was the first time Eugene had dined in one of those houses where traditions of magnificence are hereditary, and his eyes were dazzled by a spectacle the like of which he had never seen. A change of fashion had done away with the supper with which balls formerly ended, a custom made necessary in the time of the Empire because the officers who were present must be fortified before departing for the combats awaiting them, which might be very near at hand. And so far Eugene had only been invited to balls. The self-possession which distinguished him so preeminently later in life came to his aid even then and prevented him from gaping boorishly. But as he noticed the beautifully fashioned silver plates and the many elegant appointments of the sumptuous table, and for the first time in his life admired a noiseless service, it was difficult for a man of his ardent imagination not to prefer this refined and cultured way of living to the life of hardship he had chosen that morning. For a moment he called before his mind a picture of the boarding house, and was seized with such deep loathing of it that he vowed to himself that in January he would leave it, desiring as much to be in tolerable surroundings as to shake off Vautrin, whose great hand he seemed to feel on his shoulder. When one begins to think of the innumerable forms, clamorous or mute, which corruption takes in Paris, any man of common sense might inquire by what aberration the state founds schools there and assembles young people. He would wonder how pretty women can be respected there, and why the coins displayed by money changers do not take wings to themselves and fly away out of the wooden bowls. But if one goes on to consider that there are few cases of crime, or even of misdeeds committed by young men, what respect one must feel for those patient Tantuluses who wrestle with themselves and are always, almost, victorious. Depicted exactly as he is in this struggle with Paris, the poor student would furnish one of the most dramatic subjects of our modern civilization. Madame de Basson kept looking at Eugene as if to invite him to talk, but in vain. There was nothing he wished to say in the presence of the Viscount. "Are you taking me to the Italian this evening?" the Viscountess asked her husband. "You cannot doubt the pleasure it would give me to obey you," he replied, with a mocking gallantry which the student accepted at its face value. "But I have to meet someone at the Variétés." His mistress, she told herself. Is the Ajuda not coming for you this evening, then?" the Viscount asked. "No," she answered shortly. "Well, if you positively must have someone's arm, take Monsieur de Rastignac's." The Viscountess turned to Eugene with a smile. "That would be very compromising for you," she said. "The Frenchman loves danger, because in danger he finds glory." To use Monsieur de Chateaubriand's words, replied Rastignac, with a bow. A few moments later, seated by Madame de Bassant's side in her bohème, he was being swiftly borne through Paris to one fashionable theatre, and imagined himself to be under some magic spell as he entered a box facing the stage and saw all the lorgnettes leveled at the Viscountess in her charming toilet, and at himself. He passed from enchantment to enchantment. "You must talk to me, you know," said Madame de Bassant. "Ah, look, there is Madame de Nucingen 3 boxes away. Her sister and Monsieur de Thérèse are on the other side." As she spoke, the Viscountess was looking at the box where Mademoiselle de Roquefide should be, and as she saw that Monsieur de Ajuda was not there, her face grew radiant. "She's bewitching," said Eugene, when he had gazed at Madame de Nucingen. "She has white eyelashes." "Yes, but what a pretty slender figure. And her hands are large, but her eyes are lovely. How long her face is. The long shape has distinction." "That's fortunate for her, then. Look how she fidgets with her opera glasses. Her Goriot's ancestors show in every movement she makes," said the Viscountess, much to Eugene's astonishment, for Madame de Bassant was scanning the whole assembly through her glasses and apparently paying no attention to Madame de Nucingen. Yet nothing she did escaped her. All the loveliest women in Paris were there, so that Delphine de Nucingen was not a little flattered to be engaged the exclusive attention of Madame de Bassant's young, handsome, and fashionably dressed cousin. He had eyes only for her. "If you go on devouring her with your eyes, you'll give rise to scandal, Monsieur de Rastignac. You'll never succeed if you throw yourself at a person's head like that." "My dear cousin," said Eugene, "you have already shown great kindness to me. If you care to complete your work, I only ask a favor which will cost you little trouble and be of great service to me. I have lost my heart." "Already?" "Yes." "And to that woman? Should my aspirations elsewhere be listened to?" he said with a searching look at his cousin. He paused a moment and then went on. "Madame la Duchesse de Carigliano is a friend of the Duchesse de Berry. You are sure to see her. Will you be so kind as to present me to her and take me with you to the ball which she gives on Monday? I shall meet Madame de Nucingen there and engage in my first skirmish." "Willingly," she answered. "If you have taken a liking for her already, your love affairs are getting along very well. Look, that is de Marseille and the Princess Galathione's box. Madame de Nucingen is on the rack. She is disconsolate. There is no better time for approaching a woman, especially if she's a banker's wife. Those ladies of the Chaussée d'Antin all love revenge." "What would you do, then, in the same circumstances?" I would suffer in silence." At this point, the Marquis de Ajuda presented himself in Madame de Bassant's box. "I'm playing the deuce with my affairs to come and join you," he said. "I'm telling you so that it may not be a sacrifice." The radiance of the Viscountess's face taught Eugene to recognize the expression of a genuine love. From that time forward, he could not confound it with the affections of Parisian coquetry. He looked at his cousin with admiration, fell silent, and sighed, yielding his place to Monsieur de Ajuda. "How noble, how sublime a woman is when she loves so deeply," he said to himself. "And this man would forsake her for a doll? How could anyone be so? How could anyone forsake her? He felt the boy's rage fill his heart. He wanted to fling himself at Madame de Basson's feet. He longed for the power of demons to carry her off to the stronghold of his heart, as an angel snatched a white suckling kid from the plain and carried it off to his eyrie. He felt humiliated at being alone in this great gallery of beauty, without his picture, without a mistress of his own. To have a mistress and a place in this almost royal caste, he said to himself, that is the badge of power. And he looked at Madame de Nucingen as a man insulted looked at his adversary. The Viscountess turned towards him, and with her eyes expressing 1,000 thanks for his discretion. Just then, the first act came to an end. Do you know Madame de Nucingen well enough to present Monsieur de Rastignac to her? She asked the Marquis de 𝐎𝐥𝐝. She will be delighted to see Monsieur de Rastignac, said the Marquis. The handsome Portuguese rose and took the student's arm, and in a twinkling Eugene found himself before Madame de Nucingen. Madame, said the Marquis, I have the honor to present to you the Cavalier Eugene de Rastignac, a cousin of Madame de Basson's. You have made such a profound impression on him that I felt I should complete his happiness by bringing him nearer his idol. These words were said with a certain note of good-humored mockery, which made it possible to overlook their slightly disrespectful meaning. Such flattery as they implied, if it is presented with propriety, is never displeasing to a woman. Madame de Nucingen smiled, and offered Eugene the place her husband had just left. I don't venture to suggest what you should say to me, monsieur, she said. A man who is fortunate enough to be Madame de Basson's escort does not like to leave her for long. But it seems to me, madame, said Eugene in a low voice, that I should please my cousin best by staying with you. Before Monsieur le Marquis arrived, we were talking of you and remarking on your extremely distinguished appearance. He added aloud. Monsieur de 𝐎𝐥𝐝 withdrew. Are you really going to say? Said the Baroness. Then we shall get to know one another. Madame de Restaud has already made me very anxious to meet you. She is very insincere, then, for she has given orders not to have me admitted to her house. How can that be? I will be frank and tell you the reason, madame, but I claim all your indulgences when I confide such a secret. I am a neighbor of your father's. I had no idea that Madame de Restaud was his daughter, and I was rash enough to talk about him in all insolence, and I vexed your sister and her husband. You cannot think what a bad impression this unfilial disloyalty made on the Duchess de Langeais and my cousin. They thought it in very bad taste. When I described the scene to them, they laughed till they cried. Then Madame de Basson made some reference to the difference between you and your sister, and spoke of you in the most favorable terms. She told me how very fond you are of my neighbor, Monsieur Goriot. How indeed? Could you help loving him? He adores you so passionately that I am quite jealous of him. We talked about you this morning for 2 hours. Then this morning I was dined with my cousin, and I was so full of what your father had told me that I said to her that you could not possibly be as beautiful as you were affectionate. It was no doubt because she realized how warm my adoration was. She wished to gratify it, that Madame de Basson brought me here tonight. She said in her usual gracious way that I should see you here. So, monsieur, I owe you a debt of gratitude already, do I? Said the banker's wife. In no time we shall be old friends. Although friendship with you must be an exceptional pleasure, said Rastignac, I should never wish to be your friend. These imbecilities are stereotyped for the use of beginners making their first social encounters, but they always appear charming to women. and are banal only when read in cold blood. The gesture, the tone, the look of a young man gives them amazing eloquence. Madame de Nucingen thought Rastignac was fascinating. Then, like any woman, unable to reply to the student's frankly challenging admiration, she answered something quite different. Yes, my sister does herself no good by the way she behaves to my poor father, who has really been an angel to us. It was only when Monsieur de Nucingen absolutely forbade me to see him, except in the mornings, that I yielded the point, and I have been very unhappy about it for a long time. I shed many tears over it, this cruel decree, coming as it did on top of my husband's brutal treatment, is one of the things that have made my marriage so unhappy. In the world's eyes, I am certainly the most enviable woman in Paris, but the most to be pitied in reality. You will think I have gone out of my mind to talk to you like this, but you know my father, and so I cannot think of you as a stranger. You can never have encountered anyone, said Eugene, more intensely anxious to be your devoted servant. What do all women seek? Is it happiness? He went on in soul-stirring tones. If happiness for a woman consists in being loved, adored, and having a friend to whom she can confide her desires and her fancies, her sorrows and her joys, to whom she can lay bare her soul with all its engaging faults and noble virtues, and have no fear of being betrayed, believe me, you can only find an unfailingly devoted, ardent heart in the man whose useful ideas are still untarnished, who would go to his death at a sign from you, who knows nothing yet of the world, and desires to know nothing, because you will be all the world to him. What I tell you about myself, you will laugh at my simplicity. I came straight from the depths of the country, completely raw and green, having known only true and loving hearts, and I expected to live without love. It so happened that I met my cousin, who let me read her heart from very near, and through her I caught a glimpse of the infinite treasures of passion. Now, like cherubin, I am the lover of all women until the day when I can devote myself to one alone. As soon as I saw you, when I came in this evening, I felt myself borne towards you, as if by a tide in the sea. I had already thought so much about you, but I had not dreamed that you would be so beautiful. Madame de Basson ordered me not to stare at you so much. She does not know how fascinating it is to see your pretty red lips, your milky skin, your eyes that are so soft. Now I suppose you think I am out of my mind, but let me babble still. Nothing pleases a woman better than to hear such soft nothings addressed to them, the most inflexible Puritan listeners, even when she may not respond. The most inflexible Puritan listens, even when she may not respond. Rastignac, having once begun, went on telling his tale in an intimate undertone, and Madame de Nucingen encouraged him with smiles, yet glancing from time to time at the Marseille, who continued to sit in the Princess's Galeatione's box. Rastignac did not leave Madame de Nucingen until her husband came to take her home. I shall have the pleasure of calling on you, Madame, said Eugene, before the Duchess de Carigliano's ball. As Madame invites you, said the Baron, a heavy Alsatian whose round face wore an expression of sinister cunning. You are certain a very good welcome. Indeed. And, okay, that's enough. Bye.